Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're taking a look at an early title from one of my favorite developers, Video System, that predates the Sonic Wings and Aero Fighters franchise and puts you behind the wheel of a flying car in an alternate dimension. We're checking out Turbo Force, developed and published by Video System in the Japanese region and published by Miko River for the US arcades, releasing in 1991. Shoot 'em up heads will likely know of Turbo Force, but for everyone else that's unfamiliar, this was added to the arcade archives on the Nintendo Switch and PS4 by Hamster in September of 2023. The story goes a bit like this. You find yourself accidentally slipping through a time and space rift into an alternate Earth, transforming your car into a supercar with turbojets capable of flight and bottomless chain guns so you can engage the enemy alone or with up to 3 players. You'll blast your way through this alternate dimension and find the enemy and save the planet. Gameplay wise, you've got a 2D vertical shoot 'em up where you'll fly your supercar through 6 stages of mayhem, the likes only Video System could cook up. This also introduces some of the mechanics that will be seen in later titles of theirs down the road, like the Aero Fighter series. Your shot strength degrades over time and you'll need to down flashing enemies for them to drop upgrades. You've got 9 power levels total, and every so often it'll drop a level. If you get shot down, you drop down to power level 4. You can conserve your shot strength by not constantly firing, but in shoot 'em ups that's easier said than done. Lightning icons will do a couple of things, like being screen clearing bombs that cast upon pickup, give you a temporary barrier, or take you all the way to power level 9. These are randomized, but at times they can fall in doubles depending on enemy formations. More often than not, the screen clear is what will drop the most commonly with the lightning icon, but on occasion the full power upgrade or the barrier will activate. Power-ups do fade kinda quickly, so aside from trying to stack as many points as you can, you need to try to stay as powered up as much as you possibly can. The game will smack you up pretty regularly, and if you're underpowered, you're as good as dead. While you can recover somewhat quickly, when you're underpowered, it can feel like an uphill climb in spots. Enemies are also on the spongier side when it comes to damage, and the bigger enemies will take a lot of shots before going down. Bullet patterns are going to get spicy, so be prepared to dance your way through those projectiles or get smoked. Boss fights will throw everything, including the kitchen sink at you at times, and these get pretty buck, with a lot of moving parts, and bosses are often several times your size. Scoring racks up as long as you stay on the board, but once your stocks run out, you lose your score. Your score resets on every continue, and if you're going for high scores, the highest score of the session is safe for the board. With infinite loops, you can go over some insane scores, but the difficulty does get walled on those later loops depending on how many times you clear it. Not having stackable crush bombs does make this a bit more challenging since you can't drop them whenever you want. The boss fights are pretty creative and each one works in a different mechanic per encounter. Most of these are pretty straightforward battles, and a couple will have hazards like breeze blocks to shoot through that also give you cover. Majority of encounters will be taking out weak points of enemies until they fall and move on to the next stage. And Turbo Force is true to the name, being a short run of about 20 or so minutes before the game loops. Graphics wise, Turbo Force was programmed on JAMA PCB boards, and its cabinet could be seen in 2 formats, being either a custom or proprietary unit. For the team's first attempt at a vertical shoot 'em up, this does some really cool stuff visually, from its layered cloud effects and parallax scrolling in a few stages. The stages revolve varied settings from cities, desert, the icy tundra, and eventually outer space. And the level designs have 2 planes that enemies can move between, being the air and the ground on most stages. And the battles can get pretty hectic, especially late in the game and on those higher difficulty loops. There's a few sections where there'll be limited safe area to move through on some stages with tight corridors. Shooting things on the board and seeing what your bullets can pass through is often a good indicator of what you can pass through safely. Enemies will swarm you, and depending on your power level can be on the spongier side, but if you keep your power levels on the up and up, you'll be able to stand on business. You get some cool environmental effects here, like the earth and bridges crumbling when they explode, and enemy damage animations are well detailed, showing their signature style as early development. You get a good variety of enemies that start off with somewhat normal planes, tanks, and trains, but then it throws in robots, dinosaurs armed with full battalions on their back, a giant predator head, and even the boss's Space Lexus coupe. The enemy designs are pretty entertaining and sick looking encounters. Boss designs are all over the place, with huge battleships and other mechanical creations leading up to the hilarious battle with a luxury car that fires Lexus logos at you. Attacks do get pretty spicy, and on later loops the bullet patterns and enemy numbers just keep ramping up until you walk away from the machine, since after the first loop this does become a caravan mode of sorts. Sound wise, Turbo Force has an interesting soundtrack that was outsourced to another composer that remains unknown outside of Video System, though what you get are some decent, if at times out of place, tunes through the game's 6 stages. The music has the feel of early Capcom or even NMK style tunes, and if the percussion had a little more punch, it would sound similar to the Mercs arcade coin-op. That doesn't mean the tunes are thin by any means, just not quite the caliber that you would hear in later Video System releases, but solid all the same. Shot audio and explosions also have that similar feel of the Mercs arcade cabinet and Mega Drive versions. The audio does have a good bit of kick, and when things go boom here, it's satisfying. Shot shots themselves also have that Mega Drive and Genesis sound design, and it does sound good for a bass regarding shot feedback. Also, that intro theme from the beginning with the vocal downright slaps, and the tunes in action are both fun complements of each other. Turbo Force is an interesting ride of a game and a look at the beginnings of Video System as a developer and soon to be shoot 'em up legends with future Psikyo titles. And it's neat to see where it all started with their first attempt at the shoot 'em up genre. You can tell through playing it the team had a good time putting it together and deliver a fun arcade experience. While it would have been great to see the game fleshed out more thoroughly like the Aero Fighters games, it's still a sick look into the early days of Video System, and for shoot 'em up fans, it's a fun and challenging game to learn and optimize runs. Turbo Force gets a 7.5 out of 10 and comes recommended for shoot 'em up fans and arcade game fans where high score is king. While there's not much narrative beyond the cabinet cards where you can find them, it's still a blast to play even without the context. Hamster is crushing it with the titles they're able to dig up, and hopefully the arcade archives can expand the obscure shooter library even further. Seeing where Video System started going forward to the Psikyo days later on is really cool to see chronologically, watching how their design and gameplay style evolved over time. This is available on the Nintendo Switch and PS4, and if you see an arcade cabinet out in the wild, and if you like shoot 'em ups, throw a couple coins in and play a few rounds. And I thank you so much if you made it this far into the video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.